Alright, today what we're going to be doing is learning about Illustrator. If you're in my class, go ahead and go to Programs, Adobe Production Premium CS3, and then open up Adobe Illustrator. Adobe Illustrator, it's a vector drawing program. What vectors are graphics that use points, lines, curves, and shapes, all of which are based on mathematical formulas. And those mathematical formulas represent images. So this is different from bitmap graphics, which store information in a grid of dots. And one of the great advantages of vector graphics is that it can be scaled without a loss of resolution. So this makes Illustrator good for printing high resolution stuff or great for drawing illustrations. And some common stuff that Illustrator is used for is logos, maps, and designs. As you can see on here, there's different, when you do create new, it'll say print document, web document, mobile and device documents, like if you wanted to make a little picture for your phone. They've got different stuff it'll set it up. The presets will be set for you. We're just going to click on print document, and we'll just name it test, letter size, and we'll leave it all to default, 8.5 by 11. Click OK. What we're doing in the first lesson is trying out some of the different tools that it has to offer, and just talking about the toolbar and all that. If you used Photoshop before, which if you're in my class you have, you'll notice that if you click on this double arrow, you can see all the different tools. Over here you have the palette, so there you have your color palette, you have your layers, you have the stroke, the gradient, transparency, all different kinds of tabs, Pathfinder. Up here at the top is your menu. Down here is your status, so it's never been saved, which is fine because we're just trying it out. And then in the middle here, this is called the artwork. This is what we're drawing. The first tool we're going to talk about is the selection tool. Okay? It's used for selecting and moving a shape, and it can also be used to resize a shape. The one next to it that is white, the white arrow, is the direct selection tool. It's used for selecting a single anchor point instead of the whole shape. And it's used for editing anchor points of a shape to reshape it. So if you go to the shapes right here, if you left click and hold, you got to hold it for about 2 seconds, you'll have some different options as far as your shapes. You have the rectangle tool, rounded rectangle, ellipses, polygon, star, and flare tool. We're going to select the star tool, and I'm going to talk about the fill and the stroke. The fill is the color or the fill of the object. So if we select fill and then go to color, we can pick a color for the fill and it'll change green here. Down here is your stroke. The stroke is the outline of the object. So we can select stroke and then we can do a color for the stroke as well. So pick a color for your fill and a color for your stroke. We have the star tool, so we can left click and we can drag out. And actually, I have mine set from earlier, so I'm going to put it on 5. And I'm going to select this one and just delete it. And we'll talk about what I just did later in the video. But, okay, so right now you want to use the selection tool. And you can left click and you can drag your star around. Okay? With the direct selection tool, we can select a point, and you can see that it turned blue, and you can left click and you can drag that point out. There we go. So we've just made our star into an arrow. Okay? So selection tool will drag it around. Direct selection will allow you to click on a point and change the shape of an object. Also with the fill and the stroke, you can go to the stroke tab and you can increase the weight of it, and that will increase the size of the stroke. Let's talk about constraining proportions. Say we want a perfect square. You're going to left click and hold on the shape, and then let's bring up the rectangle tool. To get a perfect square, what you're going to do is you hold shift and then left click and draw out your shape. Now instead of a rectangle, we have a square. The same will be done if you try out the ellipses tool. Say you want a circle, you hold shift and then you left click and drag, and we have a perfect circle. To resize shapes, you're going to select the shape using the selection tool. So make sure you have the selection tool. You'll see that a bounding box will appear. You drag the corner of the anchor point to resize it. To constrain the proportion while you're resizing it, you're going to hold shift as you do that. So hold down shift, left click on the anchor point, and you could drag down to make it smaller, or we can make it larger. So hold shift, left click, and drag. To rotate a shape, say we want to rotate it 45 degrees, you're going to hover your mouse on the corner till it gives you the double arrow. You're going to hold shift down and then left click and then drag, and it'll move it 45 degrees. And when it's at where you want it to be, you just let go, and that will rotate the shape. The last thing I want to show you, it's what we did with the star earlier. If you left click and hold, we're going to get the star tool. And before you drag it out, what you want to do is left click and hold on the art, and that'll bring up some options. And you can change the amount of points that your star will have, and you can also change the size. So if we put the radius at 2 and then radius number 2 at 0.5, you can hit OK, and you'll have a star that has 10 points instead of 5. And then we can move it. Alright. So right now what I want you to practice doing, if you haven't done so already, is using the selection and direct select tool. Practice using the stroke and fill. Practice rotating the shapes. Practice sizing the shapes to constrain the proportions. And practice using the additional options for the shape tools. And once you've done that, you are done with the intro to Illustrator. Thank you.